I've been communicating with a client about how he should get his rifle set up before coming out to do some training with us. And I thought, I've answered this question a lot of times with various people, and many of my answers kind of come down to the same things. So I thought, hey, why don't I just record this? And this is for you. If you're getting this on what is it, February 24th, then yeah, this was directed for you. If you're watching it after that, hopefully you'll benefit from this as well. So the gentleman I was speaking with, he has a nice scope. He has a Leopold HD. I think it's a Mark V, and it has the Christmas tree reticule. It's in mil, and it's about a $2,000 scope. And he said, "Hey, is this good? I'm happy to get something different. What should I have?" And first, let's talk about brands. Leopold is a good brand. So is Vortex. So is Night Force. So is Collis. So is Swarovski. There are many great brands out there. If you're spending more than $1,500 and you're not getting ripped off, if $1,500 is really the going rate for that scope, if that's the market price, you're going to get a good scope. It might not be exactly what you need for what you're doing, but you're going to get overall a pretty good scope. So quality wise, I wouldn't care so much about specific brands. Yes, I have a preference. And for me, we've been using Vortex for a lot of years, and they have given us like a range deal that they offer to shooting ranges or shooting instructors, and it's worked. Basically, they've given us this break on prices. So we have used a lot of their scopes. And now, if I didn't have a break in prices, I would still buy their scopes. I'm sold on them. I've used them. Now they have a line of inexpensive scopes, kind of the bottom end $200 or $300 scopes. Those are cheap scopes made in China and just have their name stamped on them. Maybe they gave some specs, but that's how a lot of scopes in the marketplace are. There's this new brand, is it Arkin, I think, that recently came out, and we got one of their scopes. We'll probably get more. And I think that the company's story is, we just really wanted people to have good scopes and not spend an arm and a leg. So we sought out to make this happen. Well, at the same time, you really think that Leopold didn't want the same thing, and Vortex? Everybody wants to make a really good scope and sell it to you for, a very competitive rate. So is Arkin going to be the latest greatest thing? No, I think they're made in China, and most high quality things, the highest luxury sports cars aren't made in China. Neither are the best scopes, neither are the most best watches or any other consumer goods item. Nothing wrong with a Chinese person doing a job. It just comes down to people go to China when they want it done cheaply. So getting above that $1,500, $2,000 price point, you're going to get good. And maybe components are made in China, but the glass and other important parts are made in places where more money is spent and more quality is provided. So brand wise, if your uncle loved Leopold, stick with Leopold. If your best buddy says that Night Force is the only way to go, great, go for Night Force. There's a blog about what the precision rifle series shooters used. It's a great, Cal is his name. Cal Zant. Look up that blog, and he'll say, what are the experts actually using? One of his caveats, which is really smart, is the price point. Not everybody can afford a $6,000 scope. Some people want to spend $2,000 or $3,000, and so there are going to be more of those sold, just like there are more Chevy Corsicas sold than Porsche 911s. Just different price point, going for more of a mass audience. So those are a few considerations about price, quality, etc. Long story short, don't worry about the brand. As long as you're spending a good bit of money, it's going to be good. Go with your gut. Go with what your buddy who says that they're a great shooter, go with what they say. You're probably not going to be in that bad a shape. Now, the actual reticule, the markings inside the scope. And by the way, it can be spelled and pronounced either reticle, that's more popular, or reticule. If you go to a bench rest match with all the old timers, they're going to be calling it reticule. So either is okay. But those are the lines inside the scope. As a long range recreational target shooter, I like a busy, what's called a Christmas tree reticule. That's what I like. A bench rest shooter who's shooting at 200 yards, it's their 200-yard gun, and that's what they're into. all they need is a single crosshair. They don't need or want all that busyness. A hunter is going to want a different kind of reticule than a long range target shooter. For me, I like the really busy stuff. I love the new Vortex Razor. Is it a 6 to 36? I think it's a great scope, and that's the one I would want if I was going to go get a new scope today on a serious gun. That's what I would get. However, there's nothing wrong with a Night Force. Well, those are great. There are a number of brands that they're really good scopes. So check the reticule, see what you personally like. What is important to me is that there are a lot of markings on it, because then I can hone in on things more finely. I go to matches every so often in which you're not allowed to range targets using your fancy electronic rangefinder. And the match director says, nope, none of those newfangled electronic stuffs. You got to range with your reticule. Well, in that case, you want a very detailed, fine, lots of information reticule. So that's what I like. If you're going to come out and train with us and you have one of those, it's going to be easier. When we're shooting at a mile and we can walk you in, it's just easier to walk somebody into a target. It's easier in a lot of ways to have that busy Christmas tree reticle. So that's my advice. And I'm look down below. I can promise you there are going to be a bunch of comments. I shoot more long range than you do, and I'm a better shot. And I think you don't need that busyness. That just gets in the way. A good shooter ought to be able to shoot with open sights or whatever. So yeah, just my opinion. I like the busy Christmas tree reticle. So next big thing is MIL or MOA. MIL and MOA are measurement systems. I think of them as a language, or you could think about it like meter versus feet. So if I speak Spanish only and you speak English only, can we still be friends and go out and have a fun day shooting? Yeah, but we don't speak the same language, and it's going to be hard to communicate nuanced things or to communicate quickly if we don't understand the other language. And same thing goes if you're all you know are meters, all I know are feet. If I say that bullet landed 7 feet from the target, you're going to be thinking feet. How far is a foot? I think that's the one that no, that's what they call an inch. Which is, and you're going to be going through all this process of what is a foot. So it's just easier if everybody speaks the same language. The language that I speak, that I just kind of accidented into back when I was in law enforcement, I was on a sniper team, we used MOA. So that's what I still use. And other people used MIL, and that's what they still use. MIL and MOA, somebody will argue and say, oh, one of them is way better than the other, and anybody who uses the other is just an amateur. Whatever. They're both good measurement systems. Nothing wrong with using the metric system. Nothing wrong with using the imperial. Like it doesn't. It's okay. Whatever you prefer is just fine. Here's a little bit more practical advice. Who are you going to be shooting with? Who's going to be your spotter? Do you have a really good friend who's helping you get into the sport, and you think you're going to be going out with them a couple weekends a month shooting long range, and they're going to be spotting for you, you're going to be spotting for them? It'd be a good idea to have the same system that they use. And this is going to be, if it's going to be a long-term friend, this is a good idea. I hesitate to say to somebody like the gentleman who I'm making this video for has a MIL system. Well, I don't understand MIL. I don't like MIL. I don't work as well with it. But this guy's going to come out and shoot with me and my partner, Scott, who's also an MOA guy. He's going to come out and shoot with us for less than 40 hours of his whole life. And hopefully he's going to be going out and doing a lot of shooting with new friends he makes in the arena or old friends or whatever. So don't change from MOA to MIL or MIL to MOA just because of one school you're going to, or how strongly and forcefully the instructor happens to believe that one and only true system is MIL or MOA. It's kind of up to you. If you haven't made any big decisions yet and you don't have any friends who you're going to go out shooting with yet that you've made, I'd love it if you showed up with an MOA scope. Makes it easier for me. That just makes our communication faster and clearer. But you don't have to. We'll be able to. We're not real quick thinkers, but we'll be able to work our way through a different system. So we talked about MIL versus MOA. Talked about magnification. I like high magnification. I like a busy reticle. I like a good scope, another aspect they're going to have is the click. When you turn the knob, you're going to feel a distinct click, and it's going to be very true. So one of the tests that's done, you don't really need to with a $3,000 scope, but with a cheapo like this one, I would go out and do a tall target test, and I would do a four corners test. And these are just a couple tests where you shoot a group, make some adjustments, and see if it tracked exactly as it should. If I'm coming up what should be 30 inches at 100 yards, if I'm coming up that much on this scope and then I shoot a group and the group forms at 35 inches, we've got a problem. As I go out shooting long range, I'm just going to be chasing my tail around. That's not good. Again, if you have a Vortex Razor or a Leopold Mark V or a Night Force or is it a Valhalla or something like that? Like I hear those are great. If you have one of those, you can do the tall target test. Doesn't hurt, but it's probably going to be good. Like they make those really well. So that's something you're going to care about. The overall appearance of it, the weight of it, kind of up to you. Since I don't go out, I'm not a big game hunter, so I don't go hiking up and down steep mountains and snow. So I don't care how much it weighs. I like actually my whole gun system, my gun scope, bipod, all that stuff. I like it to weigh a lot because that means less recoil. So even on a 6.5 Creedmoor, a gun that hardly has any recoil at all, yeah, if I can take that down by another 10% by having a heavy scope and a heavy bipod and a heavy this and that, great. That's wonderful. I don't like recoil. So I wouldn't worry about weight if you are a long range target shooter. Yeah, it doesn't really matter unless you plan on doing some matches like the matches that you have to run from place to place. And if you're going to hike for 6 miles and then take a shot, hike for another 2 miles, take a shot. Well, in that case, yeah, it would pay to have a lighter weight scope. But most of us aren't doing that. So think about that. And something else that is specific to our school is that most of our scopes have easy detach uh, mounts on them. So when you buy the scope, you have to buy scope rings separately. So pay attention if you're getting a 34 millimeter scope versus a 30 millimeter versus if you're a long range target shooter, you're not using 1-inch scope tubes. Oh, by the way, those measurements that I'm talking about, they refer to the diameter of this portion of the scope. So if you see a number that says 6 by 36 by 52, 52 is this size. This is the 34 millimeter scope with a 52 objective. That's how it's written when you're looking in the catalog or online. The 6 to 36 would mean that it's magnified from 6 times to 36 times. So those are some of the numbers you would hear. So that you're going to have a separate mount. You get the mount that fits the correct 30 millimeter or 34 millimeter, whatever it is that you have. And then those rings attach to, in our case, usually a Picatinny rail. And they attach to that rail, and they have some quick releases that are just a really fast way of either unscrewing or flipping a little lever. And you take the scope off, you put it on another gun. Now you have to sight it in again when you do that, but it's not a huge deal. If you've done some shooting and kind of know your stuff, or if you're with an instructor, if you come out with us and you don't bring a scope, no worries. We'll just grab one of ours, take it off of the gun that it was on, toss it on yours, and you can shoot with it. And so for those of you who are watching this who do plan to come out and shoot with us, just let us know ahead of time. But I would actually even recommend that before you go spend your money, come try ours. And we can try several different ones, and you might just say, I get that inkling. I just don't like the vortexes. I really like that old, we have an old Leopold Mark IV that's probably 20, 30, 40 years old. You might say, gosh, I just love that. That's clear. That's a clear looking scope. And maybe it's real. Maybe you're not going to lie to us, but that feeling might be objective and it might be subjective. I've heard a lot of things from some really reasonable and objective scientific kind of friends. And when they tell me about, oh yeah, this scope is so much better in low light than the other ones, some of the guys I trust, others, I think you might be imagining things. And yeah, maybe your Chevy pickup truck is way better than those darn Fords. But yeah, it's a Ford Chevy thing. They're both good tools. They both have problems. Same thing with scopes. So yeah, come use ours. Try them out. If you like it, then maybe you'll go get one of those. If you don't, you've eliminated one, and you can go for something else. Sometimes we have companies that will loan us scopes just so that people like you can come out and shoot them and go, wow, I really like this kind. So for companies that have blown us scopes, welcome to use those as well. Something else to consider when you're thinking about mounting a scope is some rifles have adjustable cheek rests that go up and down. And with most new chassis type systems, like, and let me see if I can do this here. That gun right there, that FAR one with the Vortex Razor scope on it, the bronze colored one, that has an adjustable cheek rest right here. So you can move it up and down. So it's not as important to have the perfect scope height. Whereas this rifle, this closer one, it does not have a cheek rest on it. I think now we put one on it, but in this photograph, it doesn't. And so if it doesn't have a cheek rest, then you have to make sure that the scope here, that your eye is looking right through it. Now, if you have let's say your cheek is just formed in such a way that you put your cheek on the gun and the scope is here, well, that's not doing you any good. So you would need to get a lower scope mount so that the scope is right in front of your eye. You don't really know that until you try it out. Generally, if you have a medium height scope ring, um, or mount system, that's good. And so speaking of which, sometimes rings come in sets of two. Sometimes they come as only one ring. So really pay attention when you're buying them. And if the price looks too good to be true for a name brand like a Wern or something, look and make sure that they're selling them with two rings to a pack. You definitely need two. One doesn't do you any good. So make sure that you have the correct number. So that's one system where the rings come separately, and then there's another system, usually for the quick detach, that the rings are connected to each other, and then that whole unit connects to the rifle. And that's mainly what we have. That's what we're going toward with most of our rifles. This scope, you notice, has just a little tiny little cap on the turret here, and there's an actual cap on top of it. Well, this scope on a rifle can scrape against the scabbard or the leather scabbard. It can get bumped around, and it's not going to change. It's not going to accidentally twist the turret. Whereas this scope has the little bit taller target turret, and you can actually bump it, and you could imagine it scraping against something and rolling the knob, which you don't want, because then you're off when you're on the critter. If you don't think to check your zero, yeah, you should anyway, but you might not. So that's a consideration. Okay, now here's another off the wall suggestion. Depending on what your budget is, what your plans are, how much time you're going to spend shooting, etc., it wouldn't be a bad idea to go buy a Ruger precision rifle in 22 long rifle, or any other 22 caliber precision rifle. And so you buy that one, and you don't need as good of a scope for a 22 as you're going to have on your good long range gun. Go buy one of those Arkans, which I think they're putting together a pretty good scope for like $500 or $600. So buy one of those, or buy a Vortex Viper. I use those for years. As a matter of fact, I think my longest hit, my personal longest hit, was with a Viper. And it just works just fine. So a Viper or an Arkan, something like that, and put it on the 22 caliber and use it as primarily your 22 scope. That's your long-term plan. Well, when you first buy it, mount it on your good gun and try it out. See what you think. You're probably going to learn things that I have forgotten to say, that you didn't read about. You're just going to go, wow, you know what? To me, it's really important that it's not too hard to turn the knob. Huh, I didn't think to mention that. Well, yeah, now you're going to know. For the rest of your life, you'll know when you go shopping for a scope, you want one that's easy to turn. Or maybe you're the other way around. You want it to be much harder so it doesn't get bumped. You'll find so many little things that you can only learn by actually doing and by testing. So maybe it's not a bad idea. Buy the Arkin on that mount that you can move around, get it mounted to it, put it on your good gun, use it, find out what you do and don't like, use it for your first 100 or 500 shots through it, and then switch it over to your 22 rifle and get your good high end rifle for your uh, longer range gun. Then knowing exactly what you want, so you don't make any mistakes that you'll regret later. Something else to think about is a warranty on a scope. And do keep in mind, like kind of switching from scopes to business. Um, it would just make sense if you're buying a Chinese scope for $80 and you're selling it wholesale for 200 and retail for 300. It doesn't really hurt you to have one out of 100 of them get returned. Most people who buy scopes don't use them much. The gun stays in the closet, and even though it's a junk scope, they never get returned because they're never used, and therefore they never break or they're never noticed. Nobody notices that there's a problem with them. So keep in mind that warranties are important, but some scopes are so good that you probably aren't going to need to use your warranty for them. Um, but even the really good name brands, check their warranty and make sure it's good. I don't think any are as good as Vortex. Maybe somebody's copied them now, but Vortex basically says, go out with your scope, get a metal scouring pad, scrape the scope all up, and then drive over it with your car, and then call us the next day and tell us what happened. And we'll apologize to you for having problems with our scope when you got all drunk and messed everything up. They'll apologize to you and send you a brand new one, or fix yours if they can. Like the warranty is just so good. Unfortunately, on Vortex's lower end scopes, we've had to use their warranty a lot. There are issues. Getting into the Vipers, fewer issues. Getting into the Razors, I don't think we've had to send a Razor back. So maybe it comes down to the old saying of buy once, cry once. Or as one of our former coaches said, he says, yeah, my dad always told me, he says, we're too poor to buy cheap stuff. And there is something to be said about that. On the other hand, if you are not well off, if you're getting started in life and you really want to get into shooting, and it's going to take you, you do your budget and you think it'll take 6 years of saving up to go get that perfect scope. Yeah, get a cheapo little, like when you go buy a gun at the Cabela's or something. A lot of times they'll include a scope. This is probably this is one of those. This is a Tasco. It's probably a $30 or $100 scope. Go out and shoot with it. Go shoot with this on your 22 caliber. Learn what the wind is doing. Shoot at 200 or 300 yards with your 22 caliber. You'll learn a ton. So I don't want to discourage the person who's on a really tight budget. Get started, get into it. But I will say that if you've got a couple bucks and it's not gonna kill you to go 3,000 instead of 2,000, do it. If it's not gonna kill you to go 2,000 instead of 1,000, do it. You'll be glad that you have good glass. As I was editing this video, I realized I missed something that was so incredibly important. So I'm adding it now. First focal plane versus second focal plane. Long story short, if you are a precision rifle shooter, you're going for long distances, you're a long range shooter, ELR, extreme long range shooter, you're going to be out in the natural environment, not always at a range. Even if you're always at a range, long story short, get a first focal plane, FFP, first focal plane, or I think some people call it a front focal plane. That's what you want. You do not want a second focal plane. If you look at the prices of scopes and you're wondering, why is this one $300 more than the other one? That's, you look at, oh yeah, it's second focal plane. That's why the one is much less expensive. First focal planes are more expensive and they are worth it. When you come out and train, or maybe in another video, I'll talk about that. So that's my little rant suggestion. Let me know what I've missed, and I'll either remake this video or respond to you in the comments. Feel free to be in touch with us. Come out and schedule some training. Come out and have fun. Shoot a mile and a quarter, whatever it is you want to do. We'll try to make it happen. Thanks for your attention.